I've just come down to the lakes this morning. It's my first time out of the country, out of Scotland since pre-pandemic. It's great to be on a climbing trip. I've come down to try a route just over there, which is a route called Lexicon, just put up by Neil Gresham last week. Neil's story of the first ascent sounded like he had to put in a lot of work to prepare himself for it. Very impressive to hear. Always really psyched to hear folk that are really keen on hard projects and really pushing themselves on trad. So the crag is Pavey Ark in Langdale, and I've climbed here once before, about 15 years ago. I did the route beside Lexicon, which is Impact Day, which is an E8. I came down and I did a route of Dave Birkett's called Caution, an E8, and then the next day we came up and did this one. So I've got really nice memories of being here. And Neil's route actually shares a couple of metres with Impact Day, so it's on the same wall, and it was really lovely rock. And so that combination of a really hard looking project that looked really good with a sort of nice story behind it made me think, I think I'll jump in the car and come down here and just try the moves. Obviously, the route being E11, I'm not expecting to actually be able to climb it ever, really. However, I have done one E11 myself, and although that was 15 odd years ago, I do feel quite confident that I can climb just as hard now as I could then, if not a little bit harder. And I have done a couple of routes since then that are a little bit harder. So we'll see, it's always worth trying. At E11, Lexicon is potentially the hardest route in England, and that grade is still a massive one, which remains a little uncertain. Although I was actually the first person to apply it to a new route with Rhapsody in 2006, I'm still not too sure that Rhapsody actually deserves the grade. Interestingly, it has held on to the grade with several repeats now, but if it actually is E11, surely it just scrapes into that grade. Proper E9 and definitely E10 are still pretty cutting edge in hard trad climbing, in my opinion. Two other climbs I've done which are harder than Rhapsody are Echo Wall, which is physically not as difficult but has extremely poor protection, and Mind Riot, which is physically hard with definite potential for a life-changing groundfall from the end of the crux section. I gave Mind Riot E10, which might seem odd to some, but I wouldn't read too much into it. I think my grading is perhaps just a little bit more cautious these days. Many new routes in all disciplines are not as bad as they seem and are ultimately downgraded. Moreover, grades are not that important. I didn't even bother to grade Echo Wall on Ben Nevis. These days I think I'd probably give it E10. Although the uncertainty remains, perhaps it can't be all that hard, so long as you don't fall off. Anyway, about 10 minutes after I turned up to try Lexicon, Neil Gresham and Steve McClure also turned up, and Steve was keen to work on the route, having tried it a bit before. That evening, Steve ended up going for the big leap, and I casually put my little camera on a rock to film, expecting a smooth repeat from a world-class climber such as Steve. But it didn't work out that way. As you'll see, Steve's foot slipped on a slightly off-balance move to a small pocket. He was unlucky, I think, and he didn't quite have his hand in the pocket in time, and so he suddenly dropped. Not a great idea to take too many falls like that in trad climbing. He wasn't even at the red point crux of the route, and yet his fall stopped only about 3 metres above the grass ledges. That is not much of a margin. Hit anything on a fall that size and your life is going to change, if you still have it at all. After witnessing that fall, I was pretty keen not to take it myself, and understood that barring a slip, the most likely place to fall was even higher than where Steve fell, with a non-zero possibility that you'd be on that ledge before the rope came tight. Sometimes I'm just not getting that right. It's not feeling as good. I'm not getting as much weight on my right foot and I feel off balance. That feels better. Just more solid. Not in my best fitness with an elbow injury, I resolved to take a belt and braces approach to this climb and try and nail it without any falls. A fundamental rule of training is that you must be honest with yourself about where you currently are, not least when your life is potentially on the line. So I knew that I would need to prepare carefully. More training required. Just about the third weekend in October now, and I'm back at the top of Lexicon. I've not been able to come down for a few weeks because we've had the classic October weather of just rain and Although I have been on this route now, I think 3 times, they've all been in bad conditions. The first time it was too hot, the second 2 times the route was damp. So I've yet to just come on just a decent day that's dry. So I figured as it gets colder, it might be okay, it might also be too cold. When I left the house yesterday morning, I could hardly open my car door because it was really frosty and all the hills were covered in the first proper dump of snow. So I thought, oh, maybe it could be too cold, but it feels absolutely fine here just now. It's quite warm really. You never quite know what the weather's going to do in the UK, but in all likelihood, given that it's like the 22nd of October or something, I think that today is going to be my last day on this route this year, and I dare say we'll get into some wintry weather quite soon. But if I manage to do some better links today, that would be a good place to finish and then think about doing some training and then come back in the spring. So as always with these climbs, even when you're nowhere near ready to actually do them, you're still sort of thinking ahead to how it will pan out as you do get closer to being able to lead them. Sometimes that process happens quicker than you think, as I've shown in previous videos, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes quite a long time, either because of the route's difficulty or because of your physical form or because of the weather. Usually all of those. One problem I have is this elbow is still bothering me a little bit. Tennis elbow, they always take a good while to go away. So I have still been able to climb, not been able to train in the way that I would like to. Linking the climb smoothly on the top rope might appear to some climbers unfamiliar with bold trad routes, like I'm ready to lead, but leading is often that bit harder. For one thing, conditions in the moment of your lead might not be as good as your best top rope attempt. If you've committed to the run out only to discover this, it might be too late. You need a margin. Secondly, placing the gear on lead is always just a bit of a faff. It can actually add a fair bit of difficulty. Also, all trad climbers are also human and they can get nervous or fearful on a lead. On a power endurance route such as Lexicon, over-gripping just a tiny bit on each move can creep up on you. If you try to link the climb when you're a bit tired at the end of a session, it can be a good gauge of whether you really have the margin to cope with this. Cool. Oh, that was great, much better than expected. I managed to top rope the head wall once, first try, and then top rope the whole thing from the ground twice, first try. So that's brilliant. I mean, I feel like next time I came here I could actually get on the lead on this route. Unfortunately though, near the end of October, I don't know if I'll get another chance this year. Well, it's November now, and I'm back again at Lexicon. I thought the last time that I was here that the season would definitely be over, but apparently not. That sun's still got some warmth in it. I was staying at my mum's in Glasgow last night and had to scrape the car with the frost this morning, and it was -2 driving down through the borders. But then that sun's really warm. You forget it's just that much warmer here, and I think the temperature would be fine for climbing on the cliff. Obviously, the last time I was here, I managed to link it a few times in a row. Still getting a bit of bother with this elbow, so I'm not really training enough, so I don't feel fit. But walking up, I think the route is actually dry, and so I'm kind of kicking myself for not coming down with a partner. I possibly, if I had felt good on it today, I could have gotten the lead. So possibly that was a bit of a silly mistake. No. Well, I mean, obviously it'll mean that I'll have to come back in the spring now, most likely. I can't imagine that this warm weather will persist much through November. Oh, it's good. I can link it when I'm not fit. In November, my elbow would only just tolerate medium-level endurance circuits on my board. Although I wasn't really ready to boulder, I actually felt in good enough shape to potentially lead Lexicon. Optimistically, I prepared as if I might get a late weather window for it. I'm just sitting at the top of Lexicon, and I did come down here today to try and lead the route, but I think I was a little bit too ambitious. It's the middle of November, and yeah, the weather's turned kind of cold and wet. There have actually been a couple of dry days before today, and so I had high hopes that the route would be nice and dry, and it's kind of not. It's just seeping. Never mind. At least I can say I gave it a good shot. Not much more to say really, other than make sure I'm well prepared when I come in April. To be honest, I'd had to have gone too close to my limit for comfort if I'd let it that day, and I felt good that I now had the winter to prepare properly. My training programme, as always, was quite simple and focused on the key priorities. If you look back through the videos that I made during the winter on this channel, you can see my progress through them. First, recover from the elbow injury. Then, build strength and confidence. First on my board during December, and then on the boulders in January. Then, starting in February, I progressively spent more time on the board again, but this time more focused on the endurance circuits. As is often the case for me, I tied the process into a fun diet experiment, which also played a big role. I thought perhaps March would be too early, but it was actually fine, and as soon as I got back on the route, I knew it was on and I could link it multiple times in a row. Time to get it done. Natalie Berry came down along with Chris and joined me at Pavey, and I started up the route on lead. The conditions were not perfect, it was really a bit too hot and too still. Maybe I would need that margin after all. I waited at the gear brake for a long time, hoping that the wind would pick up. I'd only need a minute or two of breeze to justify it, and it did come. And so, in the end, there was no choice but to begin climbing. I was placing a runner in the headwall that no one else had used. There's a nut and a skyhook placement in a little slot. They're not 100%, but there's a reasonable chance that they'd stop your long fall and stop your B-layer being lifted up that crucial last metre or two if disaster struck on the last move. The downside of this runner is that stopping to place it adds potentially a grade to the physical difficulty. I mitigated this to a degree by pre-clipping both runners to the lead rope and velcroing them to my harness so that I could just pull them off quickly. This worked, although as I said, it was still a bit more of a faff than you'd like. At this point, all that really matters is the decision to climb all the way to that last move to the slot. Fall off or jump off below this and you should be just fine. But decide to climb to that slot and you better not fall off there. As I automatically moved away from the sanctuary of the skyhook, the irrational, fearful part of my brain was screaming at me, "What are you doing? Don't go any higher. Grab that skyhook." But the more rational voice was arguing back. As if you were ever going to actually grab the runner. Forget that. You're here, you've got a partner to belay you, you're fit, and you've linked it 10 times. Just climb the 10 moves and don't let go of that slot. The decision was ultimately already reached, and there was nothing left to do but grunt through that move to the slot. Sorted.
Nice one.
Fucking hell.
Cruised it.
Oh no, I didn't cruise it.
Well,
I didn't cruise it.
I could tell you were trying for sure, but man, it looked like the Velcro was a bit too strong there on that screen.
Fucking hell. Thanks, Natalie. One thing I think it's important to say is that I was the youngest person to climb the route at 43. Neil and Steve are both in their 50s, demonstrating for the nth time that limiting your goals in rock climbing due to age is a huge distraction for almost all climbers. It's the modifiable behaviours that older people tend to adopt that you've got to watch out for. Those things are the difference between your current performance and your potential performance. In this video, I talked a bit about the broad strategy I used to climb this route, but if you guys would like, I could make another getting into the granular tactics I used in the physical and psychological preparation and the tactics for execution itself. Let me know in the comments if you'd like that. I should also say that I've had a bit of a break from making YouTube videos for a while, and that's because I've been writing instead. I still do have a bit more on that front to do, but over the summer I have several videos which I've already shot and will post, and hopefully we'll make some more if I get into the mountains for some good new routes.